Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to this week's episode of the Coverlet of Comfort. I've got myself set up, sitting in my chair. I hope you can see enough, but just as these cloths are a little bit bigger, I just thought it was nicer for me and hopefully nice for you as well to, sit in my chair and stitch, which is more natural for me than stitching on my desk. So I've got my cup of tea, I'm going to have a little sip. And hope that I've got the angle right. We'll see. We can always make adjustments in future videos. So all I've done is I've drawn a circle on my cloth and I've just drawn round a plate, and I just experimented with different plates in my cupboard to find one that was the right size. Now I haven't got it central, that's just me. I just wanted it slightly off centre. So this is kind of the centre, this wonky wrinkly 9 patch here. And you see I've offset the circle. You'll have to obviously play about on your own cloth and see where you might want to put your circle if that's what you decide to do. I want to start with a circle because I just love the imagery of circles, and it's kind of circling around the self, as this cloth represents myself. Putting a circle around feels like, the right way to go. So there's many things I could do to stitch my circle. I could just do stitching, but what I think I want to do is some couching. I've got my stuff over here, and I've got this bit of sari silk ribbon I'll just put my needle in there for a minute. That's actually quite wide. It's about an inch wide, I think, if I open it up a good inch, maybe even wider. And so I could, rip it up the middle, make it smaller, but what I think I'm going to do is twist it as I stitch it down. So it will be quite thick, but I think against the cloth, I think it will be okay. And because sari silk's got these hairy edges, the hairs just add some texture to it as well. If you don't have sari silk, you could just tear a strip of regular cloth, just cotton cloth. What I would say, if you're going to do that, if it's a printed cloth, just check the wrong side, because you'll obviously see both sides. So maybe just get little bits of whatever you've got on audition, or you could use lace or regular ribbon or wool if you have, knitting wool. Or something like that, and anything at all, just whatever speaks to you. But I'm going to use this bit of sari silk, and I've chosen 2 strands of regular embroidery floss in kind of the same colour, and I'm just going to start somewhere on my circle. This is way too long, but I'll trim it when I'm done. And I'm going to start a little bit away from the edge, and I'm going to kind of twist it with my, I hope I'm in the right place. I'm going to twist it with my left hand as I go. Now if you want to twist it and put some pins, if you find that handier, you can of course do that. I'm just going to come through from the back with my knot. I'm not worried at the end of this if my knots and my loose threads are all on the back. I don't know yet whether I'll decide to put another layer on or not. I haven't decided, not there yet. I know that's quite difficult or challenging, let's say, for some of you. I know I'm getting some questions about future stages of the project, and I keep saying I don't know, because I obviously have a vague idea of how I work, because I've been working like this for some time now, but I would encourage you to try and just go with the flow. So I'm just twisting it into place, holding it with my thumb and just couching over it, and my circle is a guideline. I don't mind if I go wonky. And I couch, if you haven't seen me do couching before, I jump across with my thread in a straight line and go into the cloth, and then I come up a little way forward on the same side with my needle and pull through, and then I jump back and do the same thing. So my thread's going to go straight across. I'll go in with my needle, stay on the same side, move along a bit, and that's how I couch. Some people couch by going across and then coming back straight away. to the other side of whatever you're couching. And the difference there is on the back of the work. The way I do it is you get 2 parallel lines of running stitches. If you come through on a diagonal, you'll get a line of diagonal stitches. So I would say experiment with both. For me, the rhythm of doing the stitching this way is more pleasing, and it's more important to me that I enjoy the process than the finished result in general, you know, if there's something between those two things. But I do, in this case, like the look of the double running stitch on the back as well. I prefer it to the diagonal. So I'm just laying it, oops, somewhere in the region of where my drawn line is. Like I said, that's only a guide. You could, of course, go completely freeform if you wanted to. Not draw a circle at all, just go for it. I'm just going to pause and just check that this is all okay, because I would hate to sit here and stitch for an hour and then it not be okay. Okay, I think that was okay, apart from it goes blurry if I move towards the camera, so I just have to look out for that. Okay, so I'm just going to go on with my couching. Before I forget, it just occurred to me while I was fiddling about with my video, a couple of people, I think someone in the Facebook group and also someone here in the comments under the Monday video, which is my self-care journal video, said that they had done the Slowstitch journal project with me last year and they were missing it this year. So what they were doing was they were taking the Monday video, you know, whatever I do there. If you don't watch the Monday video, the Monday is not about stitching, it's about mixed media journaling for self-care. So I've done some collage and painting and, you know, stuff like that, some creative writing. But yeah, a couple of people are taking that theme, or, you know, whatever I do on the Monday, and translating that into stitch. And I just thought that that was a wonderful idea. Those of you who are missing the Monday stitching, maybe if you don't want to do the comfort cloth, and you can't or you can't find a way to translate the comfort cloth into a journal in a meaningful way, maybe you could consider doing that. I do know that I did talk the first week about how you could take the 9 patch and make a journal entry from it. I don't think I talked last week about how you could do that when I did the framing. But of course you can take the different things that I did to put the border pieces down, you know, the different ways of making seams or overlapping or whatever, and come up with a little stitched version of that for a journal. So yeah, so I hope you can find a way. I wanted to do this, and I know that there are a lot of people who are enjoying it, but of course I can't please everybody. But I do feel a bit sad for those of you who've said you really miss the Monday Stitch journal. And I didn't change for the sake of changing. You know, I really wanted to do this, and I'm just being careful not to stitch it to my trousers. Got quite voluminous trousers on. Excuse me. It wouldn't be the first time I've stitched something to my trousers or my skirt. So I'm not pulling this too tight at this moment, or I'm trying not to. It's a little bit, what I do is I pull my stitches tight. So I do have to be aware of that, and I'm just twisting. Now I've got some of it stitched down, it's actually easier to manage. And you see how I gather the cloth? This is why I much prefer working in this sort of modular way, because I can gather the cloth in my hands and hold it underneath and on top in the same hand, which obviously if you've got a great big piece, you know, a great big sort of quilt size piece, it's harder to do that. You have to find other ways. But I just like to feel the cloth in my hand. So, and yeah, and if you're one of those people that's worrying about the joining, please don't worry. I mean, it's a bit silly to tell people not to worry. If you're worried, you're worried, you know. But there are many ways of joining cloths together, far away from the conventional ways, and I'm going to share them with you as we go along. And however you've done this, if you haven't left the margins unstitched or whatever, there will be a way. There's always a way. It's cloth and stitching. It's very forgiving. So I hope that is reassuring. And this two-layer approach to me is just, I just love to stitch through 2 layers of cloth. It's just what feels comfortable and pleasant to stitch. It's got enough substance to it that, you know, it feels like it's holding something. And when you come to stitch into open areas, it gives the stitch definition. Obviously, if you wanted to put wadding or batting or some woolly blanket or some flannel or something in between, that will give even more definition. But it's just, for me, the stitching through just 2 layers. I'm terrified now that I'm going to stitch it to my trousers. Stitching through 2 layers is just what I enjoy doing. So, you know, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just what I do. So I'm just going to stitch my way around. I still don't really know in terms of timings whether I'll be stitching every single stitch with you as we go along. I suspect not, because some months there will be an extra week just because of the way the months go. I think we've got 3 weeks in January because there were 2 weeks doing the kind of construction. I think we've got this and 2 more weeks for the fancy stitching. So yeah, so it will just depend. So there's a seam that I'm crossing, but because it's soft cloth, it's not unpleasant. If you do end up somewhere where it's a little bit thicker and you struggle to get right through, you know, and out the other side, there's no harm here or there if you just stitch through a top layer or 2 layers, you know, if you've got several layers. As long as, for the most part, you're going right through, holding everything together. If here or there your stitch doesn't go right through, it'll be fine. I'd rather do that than fight it and struggle and be, you know, pulling or pushing with a thimble or whatever. That's just my advice. So you see on the back I've got this quite nice double line of running stitch forming, which, like I said, may or may not get covered up, I don't know yet. I'm just going to do a double back stitch, and then I'm just going to bury my thread somewhere in behind the sari silk, just feeling that it's not gone right through. And I'm going to get my scissors, just cut it off close to the surface. And get myself some more thread, excuse me, it's hidden behind my teacup. Thank you, by the way, everybody who's, excuse me, sorry, put questions for me. This Friday's Park Home Life, I'm going to do a question and answer session. Well, I'm going to do the answers. You've asked the questions, or you are asking the questions. I put a post here on the community page. If you don't know how to get there, if you go to my YouTube profile page, you know, my main channel page, you'll see written across it says home, videos, playlists, you know, and so on. There's a word community. If you click on there, that's a place where you can put posts rather than videos, you know, words and or pictures. And the latest post of mine on there is asking for questions. So you can ask me anything you like. People have already been asking about my life generally, and, you know, the animals and my children and things like that, and also about my stitching, you know, my stitching history and whatever. Yeah, there's been some really interesting questions so far. So I shall sit and try and librarian them into some kind of order, into categories. And then on Friday, I would imagine the whole video will just be me answering questions. I had no idea how many questions I was going to get. What I'm going to do, actually, what I could have done in the beginning, is just take a little back stitch under where the sari silk's going to lay and hide my knot under there. I never do things the same way twice often, and I don't think it really matters, because I don't really think there is ever a right way or a wrong way. And my tail's going to poke out, but yes, so that will be Friday's Park Home Live. I've been thinking about doing it for some time. I thought about doing it live, but I think it's difficult to manage that on your own. You know, if you're typing questions in while I'm sitting there and having to, number one, having to read the screen, which is challenging since I have to put my nose up against it. Yes, I must make an appointment with an optician. I'm pretty sure my glasses need changing for close, you know, for up close work. But also just the fact that I have to talk to you and read questions and think about responses and so on all at the same time. I just think it would be a bit much, certainly at the moment where I'm feeling a little bit, you know, I still don't feel like my brain's working to its full capacity. So I thought I'd do it like that. And also I want to give a thoughtful response, you know. Not just a kind of off-the-cuff response. But I've been thinking about not knowing where you're going to end up with projects, and that's one of the things. I mean, I'm not going to preempt Friday's video and answer all your questions now, but a few of the questions were about excuse me, about, you know, how I came to Slowstitch from the kind of stitching I did before, and yeah, one of the things that attracted me, or one of the ways in working that changed for me, was not wanting to pre-plan. Because when I made art quilts before this, mostly by machine and so on, I would plan everything down to the last stitch pretty much, you know. I would plan a design, I would pre-select all the cloths, fabrics as I called it in those days. I would plan, you know, any piecing or collage or whatever, and I would even plan and draw in advance on paper the free motion quilting designs that I would put on. So at one point it came that I didn't really feel inspired to actually make, you know, to do the making, because it was as if the thing was already made in my head, and that for me began to not be fun anymore. So this, you know, fast forward 15 or so years to the other extreme, where I nearly don't know beyond the next stitch what I'm going to do, and yeah, I just much prefer it. And that's not the same for everybody. It's, you know, some people like to know exactly where they're going, and then they do enjoy the making because they're bringing to fruition all their design and everything that they've come up with. It's just different for everybody. I'm now coming up to my granny shawl. I'm just playing with the twist a little bit to make sure it's pleasing. And I'm only worrying about the next inch or so. I'm not worrying about the rest of it, I'm not there yet. I am aware as well, thinking back over the last year in my videos, that I was much more chatting and telling stories before, and that's changed, and I think that's because of where I'm at in my life. I think my mind is different. I don't know if you've noticed a change. Perhaps you could tell me in the comments if you've been with me, you know, over this past year. But it is something that I've been thinking about. Why am I not telling stories so much? I feel like I'm much more telling you what I'm doing, you know, the stitching, and less, well, I'm probably still wittering, just wittering about different things. I don't think it's because I've run out of stories. I don't think that's the case. I don't know, there's just something that I was thinking about the other day. It's nice as well when you use all different kinds of cloth rather than all, you know, if you use all quilter's cotton, for example. There's no difference to the stitching experience between the areas particularly. I mean, you might get some, you know, some cottons that have different thread counts, and or if they have a particular type of print on them, like, you know, paste prints can be harder to stitch through, or batiks are harder to stitch through by hand. But if you have, and this, my granny's shawl, I think is probably either rayon or polyester, but it feels completely different to stitch through than this thin old cotton here. And that kind of, that part of the process of using, you know, all different kinds of cloths rather than homogeneous, is that the right word? Cottons appeals to me as well. Whereas other people would find that disturbing. They, you know, they would prefer to have all the cloths the same, so they know where they are. It's, I tell you these things just to invite you to reflect yourself, rather than to say, this is how I do it, so this is how it, you know, should be done. I'm not shoulding anybody ever. But yes, I hope to inspire you to reflect yourself as you're stitching on how different cloths take the stitch, and, you know, whether you enjoy stitching through some cloths more than others and things like that. And as usual, I'm getting the last possible bit out of my bit of thread, and in danger of unthreading my needle. Got nearly not enough left now to do my back stitch. And bury it. Another bit. Get the scissors. Oh, I know what I've forgotten to... I wanted a little bit of cloth for something in a minute. Oh, when I've done my couching. Oh, I expect there's a little bit not too far away. There usually is. It was actually lovely weather here this morning. It's Tuesday afternoon, because tomorrow, Wednesday, when you'll be watching this, I will be in my CQ West meeting. We have meetings every 2 months. And it's tomorrow, it's the first meeting of this new year. And it's an all-day affair, so I'm doing this a day ahead. But yeah, this morning it was, I mean, it's still January in England, you know, it's not warm. I know in The southern hemisphere, some of you have been reporting 40 degrees centigrade, which is hot, hot, hot. I hope you can all keep cool. Yeah, but this morning there was just a kind of gentleness in the air. I don't think it's even 10 degrees centigrade. We use centigrade in the UK mostly. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, I'm sorry. But there was just a, you know, I went out without a hat, Stella went out without her coat. There was just a sort of softness in the air. And I think it was a full moon yesterday. I don't know if that makes a difference literally to the weather. But, sorry. Sorry, I've still got a little bit. Oh, thank you for all, I'll go back to the full moon in a minute. Thank you all of you that have been asking how I'm feeling. I'm feeling much better. It was just a cold, it wasn't anything worse than that. And it's, you know, it's virtually gone. I just get a little bit froggy in my throat every now and then. Which is a good excuse to still drink honey and lemon, which I love anyway. What was I saying about the moon? Yeah, I don't know if it has a literal effect on, well, it must have a literal effect on the weather in some way. I'm not a meteorologist, but it's just those little, you know, natural transitions that happen. And there's a full moon and then you go out for a walk and it's lovely and soft and nearly no wind. And the birds seem to be singing more. Just where we cross the lane here to go into the woods, there was a robin up in a pine tree, absolutely singing his little heart out. And I'm sure winter hasn't gone away. But it was, yeah, it was lovely. Oh, now it's gone a bit cloudy again. Mustn't forget I've got washing on the line. Just get that in. It won't have dried, but you know, it'll have dried a bit. I don't have any way of drying washing other than outside or a little cupboard here where the boiler is, but I don't like really to have wet things inside because of condensation. But sometimes it's unavoidable. So I try and do the laundry on days when it's going to dry at least a little bit outside. I've still got all the children's bedding from Christmas to wash, just all folded up in the bottom of the laundry basket. I'll have to wait until it's maybe a windy, slightly warmer day. But even that has a, you know, kind of seasonal feeling to it, or, you know, you have to make these decisions based on what the weather's doing. It's kind of a closeness with nature, I guess. Although it might be irritating when you just want to get all your laundry done. So I'm now feeling this old flannel shirt of mine is a little bit more resistant to stitch through than this cotton was. I'm coming back round to the beginning. And beyond couching this piece of silk on here and an idea for something else I want to applique on there, I don't really have a plan for the rest of the stitching either. And and a vague idea that I might want, well no, an idea that I want to stitch some text. I haven't yet decided exactly what text. But again, I think all this decision making as you're working is what keeps me engaged with the making. And it's that mindfulness, that staying in the moment, that kind of call and response that you have with a piece where you do something, you stitch or you apply something or you piece something, and then you look at the piece and how the piece has responded to what you've done, and then you respond to that response, if that makes sense. That kind of pre-planning everything takes away that possibility. Obviously you could modify your plans, but and as I come round I have to decide what to do with the ends, and I do different things at different times. You know, you could either have the two ends so that they look as much as possible as a complete circle, or you could just leave them flapping like that in some way, or you could even, I don't know whether to have a closed circle or leave it a little bit open. I'm in two minds about that as well. You know, a tiny gap so that, I think I might do that. So I might come slightly inside my drawn line here as I'm coming round. And that's just in the moment I've decided that. I think if I had any idea before, it was to do just a circle. So I'm just going to creep inside that pencil line. I'm not worried about that pencil line. If any of it ends up showing, it will wear off at one point. It was just a soft, I think it was a 4B pencil, just a normal, regular, you know, drawing pencil. So I've come just inside that pencil line, and as I go along, is that my trousers? No. As I go along I'm coming slightly more inside. That makes sense, getting slightly further away from the line. Just, you know, in a gradual way. I think for this I just like the idea of the circle being a little bit open, so that it doesn't feel like it's something that's trapping. It's holding, but it's not trapping. And at the same time it's protecting, but it's not excluding. I don't know how far along I'm going to go yet. I haven't decided. You only need to know what your next stitch is going to be. That's the only thing you need to know in any moment. I think I'm going to just do a couple more stitches. I'm going to be guided by the length of my thread, which is short. Oops. And call that far enough. It's handy, a bit of thick couching to hide your tail behind. Felt like it came through, it did a bit. Just kind of feel it sometimes. I didn't feel it with my other hand, it was just the way the needle went through the cloth. It felt like it had gone further than it should have done. Oops, now I've dropped my scissors, excuse me, while I pick them up. So now I need some more thread. That's only one strand, but I shall thread the two cut ends through my needle because I don't need much. If you've done that and you've got a loop on one end of your thread, you actually don't need to tie a knot. You can, I'll leave that for a minute, I don't know entirely sure yet when I'm going to cut it off. What you can do is you can come through wherever your next stitch needs to be and don't pull it right the way through, and then go back down, and then on the other side you can just go through that loop, and there you've anchored the end without needing to make a knot. So because I went inside my drawn line with this tail, I'm going to come outside my drawn line with this one. So I get a bit of a twist in it. I'm just kind of looking at where I might want, or how far I want them to cross each other. Yeah, I think I'm going to go more or less to the end of this, and then I'm going to come back and cut that off. In fact, let's cut that off first, and then it's not in the way. I'm just going to leave a little bit sticking out. Just be brave and cut it. And so this, I'm just going to stitch it down until it's more or less the same at the end as the first one. I don't know if you can hear Stella snoring, she's asleep on the sofa just there. I don't know where Fred is. He did come in when I paused to check that the video was okay, and came in meowing that he wanted biscuits in his bowl. His bowl is now in the little room where where the cheese boxes are, where I keep all my stuff, my little, hesitate to call it a studio, it's more of a cupboard. Because it's up high there and Stella can't get it. When it was here on the kitchen table, Stella was inclined, the minute I went to the loo, for example, to jump up on there, take her opportunity to steal all his biscuits. Yeah, I'm talking about you, she's looking at me, she heard her name. So I've put his tin of biscuits and his bowl on the little the little unit that's in that room where all my cheese boxes are on the wall with all my stuff on. And that works quite well, except I have to remember to leave the door open into there. There's little madam. Oh, I think I've just got enough. I'm not going to twist that, it's too little, I'm just bunching it up. That last little bit. So I'm just pushing it with my needle up against where I've come out with the thread. I think that's good enough. That'll do pig. Same as before, 2 back stitches and bury the tail. Right, let's have a look. I don't have any concept of which way is up with this cloth either. I don't even know if there will be an up. It depends what I choose to do with it when it's done in a year's time. It may emerge that there's some sense of which way is up. It might seem logical that that's at the bottom, I don't know. We'll see. But that's something else you could do as well, or bear in mind while you're doing your fancy stitching, is turn your work and get a different perspective. You know, if you've done something like that and then you want to assess what you're going to do next, rather than just keeping it however it was when you're actually working on it, you know, while you decide what's your next move, stitch-wise, so to speak, try turning it different ways and seeing if that changes anything or makes any areas stand out more to you, or, you know, somewhere might say, oh, I need this doing to me. And that can become obvious as you turn it. You might not see it if you keep it only one way around. So I have an idea, like I said, to apply something on here, but I need a little bit of cloth. So I'm going to have a forage. I'll be back in a mo. And I think this might do. A little bit dark, but I think that's okay. I want to put a heart, just a little wonky heart somewhere. Now a heart obviously does kind of have a right way up, doesn't it? The convention is that the point's at the bottom and the two roundy bits are at the top. So that might have a bearing if you put things like that on there. And there's a little heart on the crumbs of comfort cloth that I made with my dad's shirts and hankies. I'm just choosing an area. I might want it here where the red is. So I'm going to fold it. And then I'm going to cut from the point, which will be here at the bottom. If you want to, you know, if you've got a template and you want to draw around it or whatever. I'm just going to do it like this and see what happens. You can always modify it. I think I might make it slightly more indented there at the top. Maybe just a tiny bit more, like the barest shave. Yeah, that's better. Now I need to decide where I want to put it. And do I want it inside the circle? That would seem to be the obvious place. There's a big plain area there where it could go. Well, that seems a bit too obvious. Here is a little bit of stitching that's not as it completely should be. There's a hole forming here. So I'm going to put the heart over it. Appliqué as mend. And in that way the decision's almost been made for me. And I kind of like that. And which way up? Again, when I talked before, I said that maybe baby, this is the bottom of something. So maybe the heart needs to go that way around. Yeah, let's do it that way around. I don't think it really matters. Like I said, there's a heart on my dad's crumbs of comfort cloth, and that lives all different ways. It lives draped over the end of my bed. In summer I have it on my bed because it's thin cotton. At the moment I've got my crochet blanket because it's winter. Other times it's, you know, it moves around, shall we say. What do I want to use to stitch that with? Some red maybe? It's not enough. That's a bit bright. So yeah, so I don't really think on a blanket coverlet type thing, whatever we're calling it, I don't think the way up really matters beyond, whoops, is that one piece folded in half or, no, yes, beyond maybe how things relate to each other, like so this circle, if I say this is the bottom, then the heart's orientation because they're sort of part of the same thing, I want it to relate to that. If I'm somewhere else in the cloth, you know, working somewhere else, that might be different. The orientation might be different. I hope that makes sense. That's just my thought process. None of this really matters. It's just whatever makes you happy. And it's just to talk about all the little, you know, things that go through my mind while I'm working, things to think about, so that maybe you can think about things like that too when you're working. So again, I've got 2 strands of floss. It's nearly always 2 strands of floss with me. I'll run my thumbnail down it just to make sure they're laying nicely. And I will have a knot. Now I'm going to do applique, and I'm using an applique pin for its intended purpose. I'm going to do very wonky freeform applique. Now this wool is quite, it's not really felted, so I don't want anything pulling out. So I'm going to go quite, first I'm going to anchor my thread underneath. And there again, you see I'm just going into the top layer of that blue. I might as well not have the knot on the back if there's a possibility, although I don't mind them being on the back. And I'm going to come in a good 1/8, probably more like 1/4 of an inch into the wool, because I don't want the wool to pull out. And I'm just going to do a very folk arty, primitive, wonky overcast stitch. So I'm going just off the edge of the wool into the backing all the way through, and then angling my needle to come back into the wool a little way along. And I like to do raw edge applique rather than needle turn, because I just find needle turn in general a little bit fiddly to do, and especially if you've got points to deal with, or, you know, curves to get smooth. And there's raw edge applique with cotton on my dad's quilt, and that's been through the wash and it comes out fine too. I've never found it a problem. You could of course do blanket stitch if you preferred. I'm going to have quite big wonky stitches on the back. I will show you once I'm done. Yeah, I felt. Now look what I've done. So this is the one time I'm going to have to take all that out, because I've sewn, I felt that there was an extra layer. I've sewn my backing. It happens. It happens. What you can do is laugh and take it out again. I was so worried about sewing it to my trousers, and then I ended up doing that instead. I'm just being a little bit careful of my little woolly heart, because it's fragile. My little woolly heart is fragile. Where are we? Maybe 2 more. Yep, we're free again. Okay. Word to the wise, keep your backing well out of the way, make sure your work's not folded in half. And I would also advise wearing less voluminous clothing, if clothing can be described as voluminous. I think it can. Right, so make sure I'm not folded in half. I'm not. Get my hand under, and on we go again. Oh, I can hear an aeroplane. Oh, you know, a little one. Oh, I've got a lot. I don't know if you can hear it. It sounds like it's either going up or coming down. Well, it's levelled off again. There is a, you know, an aeroplane type place not far from here. So it does happen that you get little planes or helicopters going over. You see the wool starting to fray a little bit round there. But I'm just going to tuck it in and, you know, see what happens. I don't know why I went all whispery then. Like it's a secret. It's not a secret. I'm just going to see what happens. What I would maybe say is, here you see I've done couching and I'm doing appliqué. If you had the idea to do things like that to your work, and then you know at one point, I know at one point I'm going to do regular sort of background stitching, like the Cantha quilting stitch. If you were here with me last year when we did Nakshi Cantha, and we did the fancy stitches and the motifs, and then the background we quilted with the parallel running stitches that are often what people mean when they talk about Cantha stitching. I could do that first on a piece, and then applique and couch and whatever over the top of it. Or I could do my appliquing and my couching and so on, and you know, if I wanted to stitch any particular motifs I might stitch some circles and things and then go and use that as a filling in afterwards. In fact, I just worked on a little piece the other day for a little group project I'm involved in, where I did parallel running stitches in both directions, very close together, all over the whole piece, and then I couched a circle over the top. So I guess what I'm saying is that's another thing to think about, is how you layer your stitched elements and your embellishments. Again, there's no right or wrong. There's no, this is the order that you do things in. It's, you know, just think about it, because it does give a different look. When I was making that piece I just talked about, the parallel lines of running stitch were very much the background of the piece, and the couch circle that I put over the top was the star of it. So that was kind of partly my thinking. And also the background piece was woven, cloth weaving like we did in week 1 last year. And I wanted to overlay the stitching as another kind of warp and weft, if you like. So there's the warp and weft in the actual cloth that I used, and then there's the warp and weft of weaving the cloth, and then I did the stitching again both ways to simulate another warp and weft, and then over the top of all that then I couched my circle. So yeah, it's just the order that you do things, and not in terms of technically necessarily, although sometimes that's, you know, that's relevant, but in terms of how loud a voice you want the stitching to have in the work, if that makes sense. You know, if you want it to be chorus line in the background, or if you want it to be solo, you know, right out in front singing an aria. Right, I'm nearly back round with my very wonky applique. Go through to the back. Put that pin away. You see, so on the back I've got a heart because the stitching followed the heart shape. So I'm quite happy with that, although the stitches are wonky. I'm going to take a back stitch on the spot, just through the white cotton, not right through to the front. I'm going to take another tiny back stitch and do the twice through the loop thing. And then I'm going to go into the cloth somewhere, only into the backing, hopefully. I can't feel my needle on the other side, no, it's fine. And then pull that knot slightly, just so it kind of pops into the, so you can hardly see it, it's almost popped into the surface of the cloth. And if you want a neat back, that's how to do it. Generally it doesn't bother me, but like I said, I tend to do it different every time. There we go. So that is my backstory, which actually I quite like. And you see here, this is my invisible baste. If I am worried at any point that these will catch, I mean here and there they've already been covered by the fancy stitching, but later on, when I've done all the fancy stitching, I can come and review it, and if I feel like any are problematic, I can just snip out, and I'll share that with you if I do that, or when I do that, and just snip sections out if I think they're going to be a problem. And I'd rather do that block by block or section by section as I go along, so that it's not a big overwhelming thing to do at the end, once I've got my cloth, whatever, my coverlet, whatever size it ends up. People keep asking me that. I really don't know. I'm not being deliberately obtuse, as my dad used to say, or, it will be sort of a lap quilt size, or, I don't know, somewhere around there. No idea. I don't even know what shape February's section's going to be yet. I've got some vague, unformed ideas, but I'm not sure. We're not there yet. So that's my front. So I think that gold, I'm very happy with. It's kind of picking up the gold here in this bit of vintage silk hanky. It's a nice old muted gold. It's also picking up the gold in my granny's shawl. And the little red heart just feels nice. It's nice, and because it's wool, it's nice and thick, and it's got some substance to it. And it's encircled, but it's not completely encircled. So I think the next thing I'm going to do, when I've got a circle of any kind, whether it's stitched or couched, what I want to do then is stitch around it. It's nearly it is a irresistible compulsion. So how are we doing for time? So I think I'm going to go and do that. So I'll do probably maybe a line of running stitch around the inside and a line of running stitch around the outside. I won't do anything much different, much further. I'll share that with you next week. But if you do decide to go on your own, just bear in mind what I said. If you've left your edges, not attached, don't take your slow stitching or your fancy stitching further than sort of 1/2 inch from the edge. It will make it easier to join the next pieces. So just stop your fancy stitching about 1/2 inch from the edge all the way around your piece. But otherwise, if you're happy and you want to go on, you can't wait till next Monday to see what I do, then go for it. If you're in any way unsure and you've done the circle and the heart, maybe just work on here and don't go out to the edge. But if you're confident and you want to, just go for it. Even if you have stitched this down, like I said, I can come up with a way that means you don't have to unpick everything. But if you haven't, then don't. Hope that makes sense. So that's this week's. I couched on a bit of sari silk and I stitched on a fluffy heart. So yes, I'm very pleased with how it's going. And I hope this new format works okay. I'll see you in a minute. I'm going to go and make myself another cup of tea and go and curl up on the sofa with Stella and edit this video. And I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.